All right. The Fireside PM podcast has Pete Christothoulou, the founder and CEO of Xembly. We're going to talk about a lot of things. I was just thinking to myself, this is like a product management podcast, and you're a CEO. I think every founding CEO has to have a little PM in them, or every PM needs to have a little founding CEO in them. So it's great to get the crossover. And thanks for coming on the show, Pete.
Tom, it's so great to see you. I was thinking we've known each other for a long time. We've been through some
Yeah.
through some stuff together, and
Yeah,
you
dude.
were you were definitely a incredibly helpful turning point for me, uh, in really kind of taking a product or a mindset when we worked together.
Yeah. No, it's incredible when you think back on a leadership journey, like how much we all learn from different chapters in our career. And I certainly think about like things that I learned a lot, and then also things like where I was like, man, I could have done a better job, there. And it takes some time to zoom out to kind of see things. So thanks for coming on the show. Why don't we
Yeah.
start with a little introduction to who is Pete Christothoulou?
Yeah. So Seattle native, born and raised. Went to school, University of Washington. After school, went into banking in the Bay Area right when the internet started. So I was kind of fresh into the heat down there, um, which was fantastic. And the reason I did that was I just believed, kind of like consulting, banking, if you're at the right place, is the best opportunity to see lots of different companies
Mm-hmm.
at an important milestone in their kind of corporate trajectory. So did that for a couple of years and then realized I wanted to be a builder, not a banker. Went moved back to Seattle to a company called GoToNet, where I ran kind of biz dev, corp dev. We sold the company, and then I took some time off, and I started a company with some friends called Marchex that we took public very quickly. Was ultimately the CEO of that. I hired, partnered with an amazing product leader named Tom Young very early on, where we were changing the direction of the company and doing a lot of great things. After Marchex, I took a detour. Marchex was focused on the enterprise, and I took a detour into the consumer space. And I started a company with my wife in the creator category,
Mm.
which was interesting. And I realized that consumer is really hard. Uh, and I should go back to the enterprise and my roots. So I started Xembly 3 years ago now, and been having a blast.
Say a little more about that exploration into consumer, because I think so many people who build have dreams of building a great consumer product, but it's hard. What was it like?
Yeah, I think, as you know, like when you do anything, especially at the inception, at the company's inception, not necessarily like a new product within a business, but I'm going to go build a company. You want to think about, you know, what are the market dynamics? Is it big enough to kind of create like real value in? Is the problem and or problem sets like interesting? And do you have a unique perspective, and not just perspective, but the capability to do something about it? And so, you're probably looking at me and saying, well, then why did you do consumer? Well, I knew how to build a business and bring teams together and strategically kind of identify, I think, like interesting intersection points. Um, but more importantly, my wife was a very well known creator or influencer in the food category, on TV, personality, award winning kind of author. And through her, we had gotten to be familiar with many other very powerful, very large creators. This is dating ourselves. And so we had, unique perspective against what we thought was a big problem and a competitive advantage in
Hmm.
that my wife and her network were some of the very early, very large creators in the food and lifestyle category. So, we went off and running and built a product that effectively tried to, um, we try to create a commerce, marketplace for creators to sell their products. Think about it, some of the things that Instagram is doing now with allowing you to kind of see what creators are using and then buy those products or things that we had pioneered early on.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the challenge that we ran into really were a couple. One, when you do customer research, and this is my wife, and I was really focused on not talking to her because I really want to understand what
Mm-hmm.
was really happening. I think you know this, Tom, and maybe you told me this. Customers are sometimes liars. And what I mean by that is people have a hard time not being amenable to the thing that you want to do. They want to tell you,
Yeah.
yeah, I can do that. And yes, I have that problem and engage with you. And so you can run into this kind of false reality of listening to them and falling in love with your idea and thinking it's a really big pain point. And when you go to market with the thing that you thought they wanted, you realize like very quickly you may not be actually hitting the core problem in the market. And it was just your cool idea that you thought was good. And I think that happened to us. Like I think that we realized that, interesting problem, but the creators, we didn't approach it in the right way, and the creators didn't have the juice that we thought to ultimately help it, flourish.
Was the premise that the tools you were building would help creators promote other people's products or develop their own products?
It really promote others. And so, my wife had a, very successful kind of career in that category.
Mm-hmm.
And her specialty was allergy-free cooking. And, I remember coming home one day, and as you know, we used to sell software, Tom, to people who didn't want it or didn't tell us that it was awesome. And so when I would come home and I see that she had, thousands or tens of thousands of people engaging with her and loving the things that she was doing, it was pretty inspirational to do good for others.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized was that she had this captive audience. Of course, this is, well known now because people understand influencers, but back then it wasn't. She had a captive audience that really cared about the products that she was communicating, how to make a gluten-free, sugar-free, dairy-free cupcake that tastes good for your kids so they can have something at the birthday party.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she used to get questions on how to do those things, but those questions turned into, where did you get your lipstick? And where was that skirt from? And so, what we realized was they had a lot of power in merchandising products. And so if we could take that power and their audience and package it in a way where they could derive value from it, then that would be a good thing. So that was the product that we tried to create, which was a high quality hosted kind of production of them doing their thing while they had products that others could buy that weren't their own. They were effectively affiliated products.
Yeah. And you look at today, there's a ton of activity around creators promoting affiliated products, and there's a lot of activity in that space. Do you feel like your effort, was it a timing thing or an implementation thing, or do you think fundamentally like that's just not a big enough
Well, I think it
problem?
was a strategic thing. Like we took a really big swing. There was lots of ways to go at the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Our swing was go build a destination, because creators, if you think about Facebook and Instagram and other social platforms, what you realize was that those platforms, while amazing, actually became special because they were built on very high quality content driven by top tier creators. It wasn't because Tom Leung and Pete were exchanging ideas or connecting about their kids. It was because really qualified special people were sharing how to do things, and those people ended up creating amazing content and audience through that,
Mm-hmm.
and had a lot of power. And we thought that they could transition that power and audience to another platform if they were part of the economics of that other platform. Because the problem on the large social media companies is they weren't sharing, they were using the creators as audience attractors, right? But they weren't sharing the economics that the creators enabled them to have, whether that was ad dollars on the site because they had a high quality audience or other. And so we thought we could build imagine a kind of QV early, kind of early style, high class QVC that the creators actually participated in a different way. So the swing was really big.
Right. So then that would have competed with the Instagrams and YouTubes and
Yes, that's right.
I see.
And we had enough creator mojo and audience. They had a couple 100 million audience between them, but the reality is there just wasn't enough power to pull their audience over to something new that was differentiated enough from what they already had. And of course, the creators, people are creatures of habit. They're going to keep sticking with what's working for them. And so we can never make the jump. And I think, yeah, so I think it was kind of a strategic misstep ultimately, and miscalculation on really what the need was. We nailed the creator need. We did not nail the consumer need. If you build a business in that category, you need to understand where the consumer mindset is as well. And I think we just underestimated that. We assumed they would come. The creators were there and they didn't.
Yeah. If you could do it all over again, how would you do it differently?
I wouldn't do it. A couple things. I think, going back to what I said about customers, I think it's really important to really go deeper than you're comfortable into customer conversation. And I think I took for granted my history, my wife's history, and familiarity with the market. And I didn't spend enough detailed time there. And I don't think I was as pessimistic as I needed to be when I was listening to their feedback. At least I likely wasn't. I was taking their answers at face value, so I really wasn't peeling it back. And I think I'd fallen in love with the fact that I had amassed already one side of the marketplace at very meaningful scale. And so I think it was really a misstep in going too fast and not stopping. And now I have a position that you really can go slow first, really slow, in order to go really fast. And I think I would have slow rolled more things early on.
In those customer interviews, did you focus mostly on the creators, or did you also talk to consumers and shoppers? What were they telling you?
Yeah, it's great. Mostly on the creators, because these creators are also consumers. We're consumers too. And so that's where I'm talking. I think we took it for granted a little bit that if we had something that was more beautiful, more interactive, more whatever, we could outdo what we saw on the other platforms. And we had built up what I would call we democratized studio production content by actually you're taking me down to dark places, Tom, I'll be honest, but by really creating a network of videographers, right, that would go in and create really high quality TV quality content with these creators and shows.
Yeah.
And so we've done really innovative things there, but we underestimated the consumer need. And as you know, because you work at one of the largest kind of consumer oriented companies, it's really hard to keep to acquire consumer interest and maintain it. And I think we just underestimated that.
Yeah. That's the whole connection between creators and the media platforms that they're on and their audience is a fascinating one, where you have folks even on TV, Tucker Carlson leaves Fox, and everybody's like, well, no one's going to watch Fox anymore. Like, they survive, and Tucker doesn't have the audience that he used to.
100%.
Yeah.
That is probably like the most, like, that's actually the perfect example.
Yeah.
And I'd argue, like, if he grabbed others around him and said, let's go do this thing, the same thing would still be the case.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have the success that they had based on the reach of the infrastructure that they were used to.
So tell me about the new company, about Xembly. How did that come to be?
Yeah, so I think as I said, kind of going back to thinking about the idea after looking at our wounds, I think the thing I was looking for was trying to determine, like, where is the biggest opportunity where I have something special to offer based on the things that I've done, and importantly, where we have unique perspective. And as you know, at our prior company, we had built, really some of the first conversational AI products to understand what customers were saying over the phone. And we did that at mass scale. So, the challenge that we solved there was really taking what we call unbounded dialogue between a consumer and a business, and in real time figuring out, like, what they were saying and giving those insights back to customers. And so if you fast forward and you ask, like, what was the biggest problem now that we're in the pandemic now, timing, like the very beginning of the pandemic, like, what are, like, the real big problems? And the reality is, if you think about what's happening in the enterprise, we've had a lot of ton of advancements and innovation in the enterprise, including, like, machine learning driven innovations, but they've all been back office innovations. Like, you haven't had real innovations in the enterprise to help the worker at all. And the challenge was, sitting at home during the pandemic, you realize there's actually magic all around you at home as a consumer. Maybe it's Netflix, where you have thousands of shows that you can watch at any moment, or it's your, Apple Watch that does 18 things perfectly for you. Like, these things that you take for granted now are actually, like, very magical. And at work, there is no magic. And the reality is, workers, if you think about how they spend their time, it's very disjointed. They have lots of priorities across lots of teams and things that they need to get done that are really important to driving the business forward. But their challenge is they spend half their time on tasks that are mundane, unrelated to their strategic priorities. Maybe it's an hour scheduling meetings, looking at their calendar, rearranging it to make time for something, or it's 30 minutes to take notes for every meeting that they have, and another 20 minutes to put those notes into Salesforce. Maybe it's looking at their schedule, and you used to do this, Tom, like having a real, like, life conversation of, is this meeting a good use of my time, or is my team spending their time well? All these things that workers had to do, there was no magic around alleviating that pain from them and automating it away. And so we had known that, given what we had built earlier and advances in machine learning and natural language processing, that you could start maybe automating some of these tasks away. And you could do it as if you are a very seasoned executive assistant. And, so in other words, if you could understand the input from a user, like what they wanted to do, and then take that task and execute it perfectly, then you could really build a business. And so the learning that we did, and the unique insight really was that there are already really good tools in the market. And they look like Calendly for scheduling, or Otter for taking notes, or Clockwise for doing, calendar management. But the issue was that those are all point solutions, and none of them maintain context across tasks or across information systems in the way people work. So our insight was we could actually string that together in one full suite tool that could conversationally understand what you wanted and execute the work hold context across all your tasks and live in your information systems or in the systems that you operated in to execute work just like it was your executive assistant. And so that was we believe a big need. I spoke with 100 different um, executives and uh, uh, workers across different roles and functions to really understand if that indeed was a need, and we found it was, and if we built a product that there would be something there. So that's what we started on.
Yeah, when did you start that journey?
I started it 2023 November. It incorporated November 2020.
Okay. So you were kind of doing hot AI before it was as hot as it is now.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So I guess I imagine like it's a double-edged sword. Like right now, AI is like white hot and everybody's trying to, build something around it. Now you have a head start. You also have a lot of company in terms of folks trying to address this. How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I think the first thing is you hit it. We didn't just wake up one day and say, "Hey,
Mm-hmm.
let's let's make an API call to OpenAI and see what happens and put a wrapper around it." Like that's not what we did. What we built is very purpose built, specialized, and proprietary. That's not to say we don't use LLMs. In some cases, we do, but a lot of it is uh, as a supplement to our tech. I think the thing I would tell you is that managing your work life is a lot like managing your money. And what I mean by that is as a tool, you need to be trusted. And in order to be trusted, you can never be wrong. You can't make a mistake on your calendar. It's
Mm.
catastrophic. Or I can't tell you that this action item happened in a meeting and it really didn't, because the cascade of what the product does after that to really help you would result in an immense failure for you organizationally with your teammates. And so I say that because the people that are building tech now are focused on leveraging LLMs, and LLMs are really good for casual, non-deterministic use cases. Draft an email for me that tells Tom who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like that's not that. That's kind of like, yeah, I'm going to see it first. There's kind of no risk to it. Um, that does fine with that. But when you say something like, "Hey, schedule a meeting with Tom, Billy, and Jenny this week for 25 minutes. Take notes, and then after that, make sure that Billy finishes that by Friday." Like all that compound task work that you need to happen is very difficult to instrument and to do with success out of the gate. And I think so. Our belief was that we could be excellent at practical AI that really innovated in task execution, but also Tom innovated in workflow. So I think one of my learnings going back to where you and I work together is that workflow is as important as actually the technology you're building. So, and I think people glance over that a lot. Like, I can
Mm-hmm.
build this really cool thing. I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. But building cool tech is not is half the battle, and you
Mm-hmm.
need to make sure that you really are considering how this thing fits together and makes life easier for the user. And so for us, we didn't build an app that's Xembly. Go here and you can do all these things. You use Xembly and when you're in Slack, when you're in mail, when you're in a meeting, like we use it when you're in Salesforce. It's embedded deeply in your workflow as if it's there built into that product. And so to do that, that really helps the user because they don't need to install another tool, and it really creates a nice experience because it's there on demand. And so that was really hard to do, and we've fortunately done a good job of that. And then ultimately, that's where I think we have a lot of competitive advantage because if you look at what's going on with some of the incumbents, whether Microsoft or Google or others, They're building awesome products. They're fantastic, especially for their native applications. We don't want to compete in, copy editing in a Google Doc. That's not our thing. But the reality is people work across lots of systems: Google, Salesforce, Jira, Zendesk, Notion, whatever it is. You need to be consistent across where people work, and hold all that together. And we believe that others aren't as nice playing across different ecosystems, and that we can do a good job of that.
Yeah. And so if folks are interested in giving it a try, is Xembly available to anyone now, or is it what's the
Yeah,
kind
we're
of status?
testing self-serve. If they hit our site at the right time, they may land on a link that says go for it.
All right.
But historically, we've been really focused on the enterprise because that's where the problem's most acute. And our belief is that in B2B, really, like you have, in SaaS, I should say, the most valuable companies ultimately end up in the enterprise. And we wanted to start there because, as you know, when you're developing early products, your first users are your most vocal users, and you end up developing products that solve, pretty detailed needs for that user. We didn't want to solve for the SMB or the prosumer. We wanted to solve for Uber, and other large companies. And so that's why we started there. But now we are opening self-serve very soon. And again, it's always easier to go effectively down market, which is our strategy.
So let's talk a little bit about you as a CEO building a team. A lot of the audience for this podcast are in product management. What advice do you have for other CEOs that are looking to build out a product team? Like how have you thought about like strong product talent in your experience?
Yeah, well, I've been pretty blessed. I'll say like that, number one. Starting with you, and seriously, I think before you at our prior company, we weren't builders, we were acquirers, and it took someone like you with your discipline to really help start articulating how to kind of construct products that really created lasting value, not just kind of bringing together businesses or platforms. So I think one is, we were fortunate to find people that are really good. And then with Ziad, who you brought, and Ziad is with me here at Xembly now. So, and he's our chief operating officer. So I'd say like the way I thought about it, and the way we think about it is, it's really not about capabilities, because it's a prerequisite that person be really good. And hopefully like you end up sorting through what really good means. And that's determined based on the stage that you're at, right? Like something at the A level, Series A, is very different than if you're already public. And so let's just, I kind of take, are they good at their job to decide? And the things that I really looked for, and I'm going to like focus on our stage more specifically, is, one, are they comfortable in ambiguity? Because at this stage, there's a lot of ambiguity. Even if you have a great strategy and you have a ton of momentum, which we fortunately do, there's still a lot of ambiguity all the time. And some people, as you know, just aren't as comfortable dealing in that ambiguity. They need a little bit more structure and something that's at a different scale. Even though they may say they're okay operating at our stage, taking someone from a very large company with structure who says they want to go early, it's very different once you're early. So we try to sort of suss that out. The second thing I really think about is, are they a craftsman? And what I mean by that is, the product is still early, and it needs a lot of TLC from the leader. It's not necessarily about hiring a bunch of product leaders around that main product individual. Like, you have to know, like, your head of product is that person who's going to care about it and craft and love the product in the way that I would. And I say that because I see that, there are plenty of people I talked to who said, like, yes, I'd love to come work for Xembly. They were very qualified, but I knew the first thing they wanted to do was go build a team of 4 or 5 other PMs underneath them. And that's not what we needed at this this stage. The last thing is, I think just to, do they care in the same way that you do? Because they have to care deeply about like what the customer output is going to be. And you only really learn all those three things by trialing somebody. Like I wouldn't say go meet someone and hire them from day one. Like in every senior role that we've had here, Ziad included, like Ziad is here now. He was one of the first people I talked to about this idea. He was my first board member. He's been with me on it for 2 years. Before he said, let's do this. So like we had a lot of like, is this going to work? Someone that we also recently hired, Courtney, who runs our sales and customer success organization. She worked with me part-time for 4 months before we said, let's do it. So I would say that everyone is very well intended. It's a prerequisite that they're going to be good. They've had success at where they were before. I would really encourage people to find a way to work with them before it's full time to make sure that whether it's my prerequisites or yours, that they fit those.
Yeah, that's a great topic in that is different than the classical, oh, we're going to do this loop of 5 or 10 people and they're going to really ask you hard questions and then we'll make a decision. It sounds like your opinion, your experience is like that is a very noisy signal and not super reliable. Is that
at this stage?
Yeah,
my stage, 100%. And the worst thing that any company could do at the early stage is bring an important role in that doesn't work out. And because what will happen is we're human by nature. You want it to work. You're going to give it the time to work. You're going to like try to force it to work. And you're not going to be focused on the customer and the business. And you're going to look up and it may not work. And so I think there's some things you can do before that happens that are frankly like pretty easy to get done. And if it's the right person, they'll want that too.
Yeah. How do you talked about comfort with ambiguity. How do you determine if someone will be comfortable with ambiguity? How do you try and suss that out?
Yeah, I think, what I could, I'll just point to, I mentioned Courtney, our most recent, very senior hire. Courtney comes from very professional background, managed hundreds of people at very big companies that people have heard of. And, here we are at this early stage thing, and we don't have some answers. What should our pricing be? When should we price? How should we go to market with our pricing? Go figure it out. Like, what do you think we should do? Like, I think one of the things that I've tried to be better at, and as you know, I used to not be good at this at all, was let the team go do the work. Like, of course I have opinions and as you know, I'll voice them, but I think I don't need to be as strong of a voice early on. I think the team needs to go do the work. And you see really quickly, like in that ambiguity, what do I do with this thing that's ambiguous, that's unclear? You see very quickly like how people react.
Yeah, that is such a struggle for leaders that I think many of us have encountered, which is you find a lot of success because you are passionate and you think like an owner and you care deeply about the details. And then when you build a team, you gotta let go a little bit, but you also don't want to just like outsource everything, to your team. Like you want to hold a high bar. How do you find that that balance?
Man, that's the hard one, I think. I think, you reserve the right to go super deep on the thing that you think matters the most and try to help make that thing that you go deep on as partner centric as possible. because, like we're going through something now that I care deeply about, but we have a very successful, very senior, successful, qualified group to think about it. But I'm still in there being like, what are we doing here? So I think the way I think about it more now is I used to be very prescriptive, and now I'm a little bit more focused on trying to ask the right questions to make sure that we're framing the thing that we need to do in the right way, and also learn. Like I don't, I realize like I'm not an expert in a lot of things, so I have as much to learn as anybody. And in the places where even I have strong opinions, I'd say most of the time they're loosely held.
Yeah. That reminds me of advice I got a few years ago in some leadership training, where the senior leader was saying, hey, at a certain scale, I can't get involved into every detail, but every quarter there's one or two things that I've decided are critical, and I will go deep. The rest of it, like the team's gonna have to do what they do, but there are things that I strategically pick to go deep on, and everyone knows what those are. And so I think that kind of sounds similar to what you're describing as well.
I think so. I think it's a good way to frame it.
Yeah. Now you've been at Xembly now for almost 3 years. Like, if you could go back in time, like what are some lessons you've learned about either leadership or product development, product strategy, that you kind of reflect on today and say, oh yeah, we've learned some hard lessons. We'll keep that in mind for the next 3 years.
Yeah, I think, like we have some lessons. I think first, like we're having a lot of fun. And I think that we're old enough to have made many, many, many mistakes before. And I think we try to be mindful of those mistakes in Xembly. And so while not everything is perfect, like we feel really good about like the way we're conducting ourselves. One of the things I keep trying to do is, again, like going back to like the customer is sometimes a liar to you. You got to be careful. You have to say that about yourself as well. You can't always fall in love with the metrics or your view on an initiative or how the product should shape. So I think we're trying to be continuously self-reflective and honest with ourselves. So I'd say and I think we're doing a good job of that. But I'll tell you one learning that I've had from before that I've employed here that I think is very helpful, and I'd encourage others to do it. Is I have this thing I say, like, kind of do the unscalable in order to scale. And other people have like a similar view. I think I've heard Reid Hoffman say something in a kind of similar vein. But what I mean by that is it's okay to do things that sound like clunky and manual and hard versus having a technology-driven approach in order to figure out like what the thing is and craft like the right product. The best example is at Airbnb. I think the founders went out and they were taking pictures of people's rooms, right? Like how unscalable is that? Like, just it makes no sense. I think they're, fluffing pillows in someone's house to make it look better. Like that's very unscalable, but they had to do that to figure out that kind of quality and craftsmanship and attention to detail matter to the business. And so for Xembly, I can remember very clearly having a point of view on what this product should look like. Like saying a full suite product 3 years ago was very against the grain. Like, as you know, Tom, VCs would say, well, what's the one thing you're doing? Focus on one thing. Like, our one thing was the full suite. It was this big thing. And in order to kind of figure that out and go back to what we believed to be an amazing workflow, we had to do the unscalable to scale. Like there was no OpenAI 3 years ago, right? And so how do you create perfect meeting notes and capture the perfect action items? And we had to do things that like took us down the journey of not being very scalable, but doing those things has made our product incredible now. Like we had a view of what could be done, and then could take technology and say, how do we now automate this thing away? And that's what we've done. So I'd say like my biggest learning is it's okay to start really messy and really small in a way that you don't think you'll be able to scale. If the vision of that takes you to like where the product can be fantastic.
Yeah. And is that related to what you said earlier around sometimes you have to go slow to go fast, or is that a different concept?
No, I think they're very connected. Like
Yeah.
I think they're very connected. And you know, you get going, like you want to like put up an MVP as quickly as you can and push on the gas. And I think, you know, going back to my prior experience, as I mentioned, in the consumer space, like I did that. Like I went super fast. And if I had taken the advice that I'm saying myself now, I think I would have like avoided some pitfalls.
Yeah, that is such a struggle where, especially I think in a startup environment, you're always like feeling like you're going too slow and someone else is gonna, leap ahead of you or hit their numbers before you do. And it does create this risk that you end up like lurching. And, in the long run, had you maybe been a little bit slower, but maybe more judicious, you might end up in a better place. I mean, I remember in my startup experience, we were so fired up about how many cards we were moving from the to-do board to the shipped board, and we were just putting features out like feature factory, and we lost track of like what the hell problem are we trying to solve here.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it's look, it's hard, but those are good lessons. I mean, look, there are examples all around us of companies who are not the first or even
Hmm.
the second, who have taken a little bit of time and are now category leaders. Um, I just saw a Tim Cook quote somewhere, like, you know, people are building lots of products that are, you know, in the AI space, and where's Apple? And they're like, you know, we'll be there. Don't worry.
Hmm.
And I think it's okay if you have a compelling vision that you in a view that's um, unique. History says that you can win if you're not first.
Yeah, definitely would not count those guys out for
Yeah.
sure. Well, maybe last question, Pete, is what's some good advice that you've gotten maybe in the last few years that has really stuck with you that other people can benefit from?
Man, that is a good question. I think I've given you like I think I'm out of advice now. I've kind of given it. You know, it's a cliche, but you hit on this earlier with like, you know, the team building. Like it's truly the people that you have are it's what the difference is. It's never about you.
Mm,
And so I just think it's really worth like taking your time on crafting the team and not rushing it and really finding like the fit based on whatever your prerequisites are. And Tom, you know this. I used to be really fast hiring. Where did that person work? They are at Google, and then and what Amazon, and oh, yeah, in. Tom said they're good. Good enough for me.
right.
Like that's a that's most of the times like a recipe for disaster is what I found. And so we are really slow and deliberate in those decisions on how we craft the team, especially now your first 50 people,
Hmm.
they set the tone and culture for the company. And I don't think you can you can't take that for granted. One person at our stage could transform the company in either direction.
Yeah.
And so we're really careful about crafting that.
Yeah, totally. Like if you think about the scenario of universe A, you hire too fast and you have a bunch of folks who just are not a good fit and it's a struggle. And then universe B, where you hire too slow and you got great people, but you wish you had a few more. Universe B wins every time.
Every
There's no question.
time.
Yeah, yeah.
Every time.
Well, Pete, it's been great catching up, and thank you so much for sharing your experience. And hopefully, folks will try out Xembly and learn more about it. Maybe they need to go in the incognito and refresh and get the experiment arm to try now.
Or just send me a note. We'll send you a special link.
Love it.
Hey Tom, I love what you're doing. It's a big deal. It's very helpful. Like it's been awesome watching you.
Yeah. Well, it's a pleasure having the conversation, and we'll have to have you back on soon.
All right, buddy.
Later.